Plenary session of Oceans 2022, and we saved the best for last. Resilient coast, adapting today to secure tomorrow. You've heard Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, thus far, all about how we can take a whole of government, whole of community, private-public partnerships, the Navy, NASA, NOAA thrust. You heard yesterday from the local municipalities and Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So we've tried to capture the mix of what this conference is all about and what conferences like this mean. And it's been done in a hybrid approach. We've had phenomenal success thus far with the registrations and the interest, and we hope you all take away something meaningful and important as we emerge from COVID with a whole new sense of life, enthusiasm, and energy about what we can do with this blue planet. So I'd like to introduce to you now Carl Goldman, who is the current Director of the United States Integrated Ocean Observing System Program Office, housed in Silver Spring, NOAA. You've heard me talk a little bit about Larry Atkinson and our tribute to him throughout this week. It was Larry Atkinson in 2005, 1 year after I left the Navy on active duty, that I took a drive up to Silver Spring. I drove Larry, he was my passenger, and he introduced me to oceans.us, and then we drove over, took the red line to Silver Spring to meet Dr. Spinrad, and guess who also was at our meeting? This gentleman right here. I don't know if you remember that or not, but integration of ocean observing systems I'm a very, very strong believer in it. It's, to me, the future of what we need. How do we integrate all of these data sources and use them for the needs of our nation, of our world? So, Carl, without further ado, thank you for how we end our conference on such a high note. And for all of my colleagues and friends who are with us on stage tonight, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray. We had this initially scheduled on Tuesday, and it was against Larry Atkinson's memory service and celebration, and that just didn't work for us. And we said, can we change? And so we got the last slot in the conference, and we're trying to save the best for last. That was a great introduction, Ray. I had forgotten about that meeting that you mentioned. I started at NOAA in 2000 at the Coastal Services Center in Charleston, working in the director's office. At the time, Margaret Davidson was director, but she was the acting head of the Ocean Service at the time. 2 years later, Dr. Spinrad started, and then I went up and worked for him for a year, and he hired me as the first person working full-time for IOOS and NOAA in 2004. So they jokingly, Margaret called me him the king of OBS and her the queen of OBS and me the prince of OBS at that time. Not many people know that little moniker from her. So thank you everyone for joining us. As Ray said, I'm the director of IOOS. I think it's one of the best jobs I could ever have. I get to work with amazing partners who deliver data and information into decision support tools that help people make choices every day. From all over the globe, we use ocean data and information to make decisions. People don't even often know it. So today we have an excellent lineup of quick talks about applying ocean and coastal data towards decisions. And to kick us off, we're going to have Chris Ostrander make opening remarks for us. Chris is a longtime friend of mine. He's now, trying to get your title right, Executive Director for Marine Technology Society. Prior to that, Chris served in a range of leadership roles in higher education, spanning technology, licensing, and commercialization, industry partnerships, foundation and corporate philanthropy, operational oceanography, and research administration. He's a close friend of IOOS, having been the founding director for the Pacific Islands part of IOOS within the United States called PAC IOOS. So without further ado, Chris, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl, for that kind introduction. Thanks, everybody, for being here this afternoon. So everyone knows that the ocean is the lifeblood of our planet's most vital functions. From the air we breathe, to the food we eat, to the energy, raw materials, and transportation systems that underpin our global economy. And for millennia, people have recognized the tangible value of ocean resources. In just the last few decades, though, the collective exchange and value of those resources has been known as the blue economy. The blue economy is vast, it's complex. It spans fisheries and tourism, mining, shipping, transportation, and a range of other sectors. In the US, those sectors support more than 2 million jobs, and they add more than $300 billion to our GDP every year. To give you a sense of scale, the market value of the US blue economy is larger than the annual total economic output of all but 30 sovereign nations. The blue economy sits atop a landscape of a rapidly changing ocean and increasingly crowded coastal communities. Changes in marine ecosystems impact the productivity and the efficiency of the services encompassed in this traditional blue economy. More extreme storms are elevating risk to lives and property. Changing water levels threaten the safety of maritime navigation, and warming and acidification are reshaping our global fisheries. As the impacts of the rapid and accelerating pace of climate change rise, so too does demand for information about our oceans and coasts. From an economic standpoint, this growing demand for information presents a unique opportunity to create value-added products that address a durable and defined market need. It also gives us an opportunity to evolve our concept and evolve the definition of what constitutes the blue economy. Remote sensing, autonomous systems, advanced computing, all of these and more are unlocking unprecedented amounts of information about our ocean. Information that is essential for all sectors of the existing blue economy. The sheer amount and scope of information being generated allows us to forecast, understand, and unlock insights about our ocean rapidly and at scales suitable for real-time decision-making that have never been possible. Over the last decade, we've entered into a new age of ocean information and technology. The decision-making requirements of our modern and interconnected world have spawned an entirely new industry focused on the collection, analysis, and dissemination of ocean and coastal data and products. This 21st century new blue economy, inclusive of traditional marine sectors and the growing information services industry that supports them, is dynamic and it's knowledge-based. The ocean data of today doesn't just help us understand what goes on beneath the waves, it's essential to support our national economic growth, to protect the ocean's health, and to inspire solutions to myriad societal challenges. NOAA is one of the world's largest providers of marine data, including forecasts, predictions, and outlooks for dozens of essential ocean and climate variables. And to support the growth of both traditional and emerging sectors of the new blue economy, our partners at NOAA provide these data and information freely and openly to everyone. Through existing programs and through the development of new initiatives, NOAA is working to drive growth in the blue economy through 3 interconnected efforts: to increase the volume and diversity of ocean observations, to enhance the dissemination and accessibility of those data, and to use those data to improve their accuracy of models that predict ocean and coastal change. So the new blue economy is our ocean economy of today. Precise, timely, and reliable ocean data, whether generated by public sector actors like NOAA, by the private sector, or through a hybrid observing architecture, are used across the nation for decision-making every single day. Zillow and Redfin use water level data and DEMs to identify homes that will be affected by sea level rise. Utility managers in the Great Lakes use HAB data to optimize drinking water treatment. Hurricane forecasts rely on uncrewed systems to collect subsurface data before the storm makes landfall. Mariners use real-time water levels, currents, and met data to navigate waters safely and efficiently. As we heard earlier in the week, offshore wind operation requires precise knowledge of physical variability in exact real time. And fishers, whose efforts provide protein for more than 1 billion people on the planet, use remotely sensed and in-situ data every single day to decide where they can safely maximize their productivity. As the attention of the world pivots to and focuses more on the incredible resources the global ocean provides, and the risks to those resources from mismanagement, from overuse, and from a changing climate, the new blue economy has enormous potential for impact and growth. As Dr. Spinrad, the NOAA administrator, has noted, the ocean information sectors of the new blue economy alone represent a $100 billion market opportunity, only a portion of which is currently being addressed. The backbone of this new market opportunity and of the new blue economy is ocean and coastal observations. And the value chain of these observations extends from the providers of sensors and platforms through the operators of those systems to intermediaries that add value and generate services, all the way to the end users who consume the knowledge-based products. The currency that keeps this value chain producing is access. Access to cutting-edge sensors, to platforms, to raw data, to model output, and to the refined products that are generated. So growing the new blue economy requires that we sustain and expand our marine observations and data streams, and we ensure an unbroken chain of access to information stretching from the sensors in the ocean all the way to the consumers of the data. If we can do this, the knowledge economy that we're developing will play a major role in delivering climate intelligence, situational awareness, and real-time decision-making products across a wide swath of sectors, not just those in the traditional blue economy. So to explore some of those examples from a few sectors, I'm happy to turn now to each of our next 3 speakers, each of whom is going to share a different perspective on the value and impact of ocean observing in the new blue economy of today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. At the beginning of the week, I had a chance at the Maricoo's Founders Celebration to thank the founders of Maricoo's, the Mid-Atlantic region of IOOS. And I focused that talk on partnerships and the people that make them happen. And so what we have today is some people that are going to talk to you about the way we do the work and transfer that knowledge, capture, learn from the data and information, learn so that it becomes knowledge that can be used for decisions. And so these lightning talks I'm really excited to have for you to listen to today and for us to have a conversation afterwards. And first up, we have Dr. Jan Newton, who is a senior principal oceanographer with the Applied Physics Laboratory of the University of Washington, an affiliate professor in both the UW School of Oceanography and the School of Marine and Environmental Affairs. She's also the executive director of NANOS, the Northwest Association of Networked Ocean Observing Systems, which is part of the broader program of IOOS throughout the United States. Jan is applying research on local scales to a global network, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, which she co-chairs. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Jan.
Thank you so much, Carl. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here today, and I do really enjoy being the director of NANOS. What I'm going to talk to you today is about a new project funded by the National Science Foundation, their Convergence Accelerator Program. And our program is called Backyard Buoys, but you'll definitely see how it fits in and is complemented by NANOS. So I have the slide. Great. So our project is focused on the indigenous blue economy. This is an economy that has been going on since time immemorial. The indigenous groups that you see here in the Pacific Northwest, in the Pacific Islands, and in Alaska depend on wave data for their lives and livelihood. Their connection to the sea is so extreme and has been for millennia. While we have wonderful wave buoys by NOAA and CDIP, most wave buoys are out in the open ocean providing real-time data on ocean conditions that are essential for our understanding of the wave field. However, I will note that traditional buoys are too expensive to buy and too expensive to operate. And then in the Pacific Northwest, this really hit home for me as director of NANUS when a Quileute tribal representative kept coming to me and saying, we need wave data off La Push Harbor. And for 20 years, I've had to say, I'm sorry, I don't know how to make that happen. Fortunately, so far, a company has available technology that breaks both the size and the cost barriers. That float that you're looking at costs about $5,000. So that was great. That put us through one barrier. But as we all know, having ocean observing is way more than just having your buoy. You need everything else that's going to support that. So our solution in backyard buoys is that indigenous communities who really want autonomy, that they want to be involved in the stewardship of these lower cost, user-friendly technology that can provide real-time wave data, adaptable for other ocean data needs. So waves is only the tip of the iceberg here, but a really great variable to start with. As we work with the communities, we're doing that from a position of strength. Our regional association's been in existence for over 20 years, much like IOOS, and what is really powerful is that we have relationships with, for me, the tribes in the Pacific Northwest, in Hawaii, the indigenous communities in the islands, and in Alaska, the native communities around the Arctic and the other coastlines. So we were able to leverage those relationships, those trusted relationships, to embark on this together with our folks as participating as co-PIs. So that is really the basis of the solution of backyard buoys, to get wave data into the hands of indigenous communities that need this. And through the NSF project, these are the partners that you see involved. So NANUS, IOOS, and PAC-IOOS. There's the technology and educational partners that we have that are going to be part of the program as well. And then there's our indigenous community partners in all three of those areas. But because we are all part of IOOS and we are all part of GOOS, this idea, this concept, these tools can be exported to the entirety of IOOS if other regions want that, and beyond, certainly to Canada too. So what are we doing for our phase 2 of this award? We're going to develop a modular way where the communities can come together and input into something that is going to ask them about the resources that are needed, a boat, what kind of data services, et cetera, so that there's an understanding of the partnership, the true partnership of who's going to do what, and that we have trust in that. The acronym is a Community Research Implementation and Stewardship Plan, which we abbreviate to CRISP, and so it's going to be an online tool to generate a CRISP. We have also, during phase 1 of the NSF project, worked to sketch out low-fidelity prototypes of a data delivery app. NANUS, PAC-IOOS, and IOOS all have wonderful data delivery systems, but not all of them work when hands are wet and you're out on a fishing boat in a remote area. So we need something that's simple, and we've been discussing with the community members exactly what that should look like. What's also important is bridging to indigenous knowledge. These communities have been reliant upon indigenous knowledge for millennia, as I said, and now we want to complement that and bridge to it, not to replace it. And then lastly, education modules. And as one of the elders said, for this project to succeed, there need to be less gray hairs in the room. All of this, which is very place-based, very local, is really rooted, I think, in what the Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is really all about. There's a quote from them, and I am excited that this is very much in that vein. So here is a quote, saying it better than I can. This is Bert Fuviava from American Samoa. And we have a beautiful video where you can hear him say this quote, which is, "This project has the ability to bridge local indigenous knowledge and scientific data collection, making the information needed for the ocean safety decisions more accessible and relevant to our local community." Getting quotes like that is so powerful and so important and really relies on that trust. So with that, I'll conclude and say that we really feel that this project can succeed because we've heard from our partners not just that they want the data, that they need the data, not that they want a buoy, they want multiple buoys, but they're going to decide where those are placed. It's now possible thanks to the technology of SOFAR, but also to the infrastructure of IOOS in which this will embed and be sustained going out on into the future. And lastly, I'll just say the cost of waiting is high as seas and temperatures rise. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. I love hearing those quotes from the local stakeholders, and the understanding and the value of this work has never been clearer to me than this year when you think about the storms that have been hitting our coast, and that we had 2 tropical storms bearing down on the western side of Alaska and Puerto Rico on the same weekend. And I had to send a note to both directors of IOOS. That was the first time I'd ever done that, send one to Alaska and Puerto Rico to say, take care, I hope you fare well through the storm. Our next speaker is Dr. Gerhard Kuska. And Dr. Kuska is the Executive Director for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Association Coastal Ocean Observing System, or MARICOOS, a NOAA federally certified regional association of academic, governmental, and private organizations from Cape Cod to Cape Hatteras. Gerhard has another role as the chair of the board of the IOOS Association, and he's served for over 35 years in a variety of positions in organizations in the US, Europe, the Middle East, including NOAA, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, the United States Senate, the US Commission on Ocean Policy, and private industry with the sectors for international cargo transportation and for environmental services. He received his PhD in marine policy from the University of Delaware. So Gerhard, take it away.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Chris. Thanks to my fellow panel members. I originally had a talk that was going to be about something specific, a specific case study, but I'm not going to talk about that. And that's the power of MTS and the gala and drinks. Because last night they convinced me that I should speak on something larger, more at the 60,000 foot level, that's more important in creating how IOOS can serve the new blue economy. Back in MTS Oceans 15, I gave a Blue Tech Ignite talk that discussed innovation and product development as a contributor to the blue economy. Over the years, obviously, that definition and the definitions have evolved so that we now look at the new blue economy as this data-driven piece of the larger blue economy. At the same time, however, IOOS has evolved and matured over time to a point where we can serve as an incubator, a support system for the development of this blue economy. IOOS and the regional associations are this public-private partnership established in law. So there's stability there. We have existing legal frameworks in place. There are existing federal data pathways in place. There are existing funding vehicles in place. So what does this all mean? Specifically, all 11 regions are certified by the federal government for the work they do. receiving tort liability coverage and a stamp of approval that equates what is served through the IOOS regional associations, whether it's generated by IOOS or whether it's leveraged from other partnerships. That stamp of approval that people that are using that data, whether it's government, private sector, local officials, tribal entities, they're getting the same quality data that they would be getting from the federal government. At the same time, we have a better understanding of the stakeholder and user communities, more broadly speaking, and getting into underserved and underrepresented communities in partnership with our federal partners and with programs across government, not just in NOAA, but with other agencies as well. We also have broader federal funding and funding from diverse sources that creates a stronger ability to collect, manage, disseminate, and create products to a certain extent. We also have more partners engaging with us, not just at the federal level, but across private sector and our various nonprofit and academic communities. When you bring all that together, what you have is readiness and stability to serve new blue economy partnerships. Now, if we look at the private sector is able to bring expertise in product development, penetration into markets and a strong understanding of markets and users, and ideally capital investments to build that business that we can support. Now, there's a variety of areas that we can engage in together: maritime, transportation, safety, commerce, things like water quality, which is a large overarching umbrella term that many things can fall under. As well, fisheries and natural resources, and the various decisions both in government and in the community that affect that as a food source, as an economic contributor to our communities. Also, coastal hazards, all the flooding, sea level rise, climate-related issues that affect business, affect our communities, that have the potential for the development of products and tools to support decision-making at a variety of levels. And I'll just add finally, and this list isn't necessarily comprehensive, but I think it gives you a good sense, energy. And we have heard and we see, just off our coast here in Virginia and throughout the entire Mid-Atlantic, the development, the plans for the development of offshore wind energy. And here we have a tremendous opportunity where we're seeing a generational shift in the amount of activity happening offshore. Granted, the Mid-Atlantic has been busy for a long time with a host of issues. We boast a quarter of U.S. population in this footprint between Cape Cod and Cape Hatteras. But now, with this additional major use out in our waters, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made at government level, with offshore developers, with local communities, with stakeholders as to how this should or should not proceed. And that requires data. So there's an opportunity for data sharing to happen with those communities through the IOOS regional associations, where federal data from a whole host of sources, non-federal data, is all coming together in quality-controlled, easy access, transparent, and free for those decision makers in those various stages of the process, all the way till one day when those sites are taken away. But there's also an opportunity for data sharing in the other direction. There's a lot of data being collected by offshore developers, right, that can be shared, and there has been expressed interest from some of the developers to share those data. Some individual agreements have already been signed, some with government, some with regional associations. But I point out that rather than doing this individual type agreement, I see a huge benefit for agreements with regional associations, because all the agencies have access to those data. They know that they meet their standards, but it's also available to the private sector. It's available to the nonprofit sector so that they can develop those data, those model outputs, those predictions into value-added products that they can then further market to users and to communities. So we have a tremendous opportunity in that we have tools, right? We've just, if some of you may have noticed that we released our latest version of our ocean portal, IOOS Oceans Map, and had a talk here, and it provides a huge jump in capability of model data comparisons, of stoplight functions, of tailoring, sharing with colleagues that is available at little to no cost to the community. Well, it's actually at no cost, unless you would like to tailor it further in some way that serves you specifically. But this can also be done by the users themselves. So we have these sorts of tools already available to support the development of the new blue economy. And it's not just IOOS. All the regions, all 11 regions have similar capabilities, meeting the same national standards, acting as a national network with the regional nuances that are important to serve those communities locally. So we have all this in place. We have the ability to move forward. We need to have the dialogue and the conversations. We're ready. There's stability, and we look forward to engage with the communities in all these areas as the new blue economy is developed. Thank you.
Having trouble with that today. Thank you, Gerhard. So our final talk today is from Dr. Liza Wright Fairbanks, who is a John A. Knaus Marine Policy Fellow at NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program. And at OAP, Liza is the national coordinator for 6 regional stakeholder networks focused on building capacity for ocean acidification research, outreach, and education across the country. Liza earned her PhD in oceanography from Rutgers University, where she used novel glider technology to investigate seasonality and implications of carbonate chemistry changes in the mid-Atlantic bight. And I don't know if Liza knows this, but I've been working with the Ocean Acidification Program since before it started, when Libby Jewett and I were in meetings together in California that helped launch the beginning of the network and the Coastal Acidification Network of Partners. And her experience, I hope, is going to teach you more about the way the people that we need to do this work are being developed and cultivated within our communities. So take it away, Dr. Wright Fairbanks.
Thank you, Carl, and hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to be here today to speak on behalf of NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program on ocean acidification research in the new blue economy. The Ocean Acidification Program is a program within NOAA's research line office, and our research portfolio takes a transdisciplinary approach to understanding ocean chemistry and the effects of changes in that chemistry. So we have these 3 main categories of research that we fund. They are environment, which is our monitoring and modeling of acidification; sensitivity, which encompasses our biological responses and ecosystem changes due to ocean acidification; and then human dimensions, which are adaptation strategies, socioeconomic impacts of acidification, and education and outreach needs. Together, these 3 categories can combine to inform a region's vulnerability to acidification and the decisions that need to be made in order to address that vulnerability. When I think about our work in terms of the new blue economy, I picture it just like this pyramid, where we have the collection and synthesis of environmental and sensitivity data at the base, and then we can build upon that base of knowledge to start understanding ecosystem shifts and biological tipping points due to acidification. And with all of that understanding and knowledge, we're able to finally assess vulnerability and potential adaptation strategies for vulnerability. So I'm going to give a broad overview of each of those 3 portions of the pyramid today, and I'm happy to take any questions about them during our discussion. So starting at the bottom, this is our data. The map here gives a snapshot of a good portion of our ocean acidification observing network in the United States. We have 16 coastal moorings that collect carbon system information for us. The locations of those are indicated in red. We sponsor 4 regional cruises throughout the nation. Those are indicated by the colored shading along the coastlines here. And along with those synoptic cruises, we also utilize ships of opportunity, which carry carbon sensors for us and collect a lot of information across entire seas. We also have a lot of partnerships with national parks and with community monitoring efforts that collect a lot of good information in the near shore. So we have a ton of data, and the next question is, what do we do with that data? This is where we move into that middle portion of the pyramid, where we can begin utilizing our data to understand what's happening in the ecosystem and how it might affect biology. So one way that we use our data at OAP is through integration into data products that can be used to support decision-making in research and in industry. We have a wide variety of timescales of products. They range from nowcasts and daily forecasts of acidification status in the Chesapeake Bay to seasonal forecasts of acidification that can be integrated into ecosystem assessments in the Pacific Northwest, and all the way up to our climate level projections that allow us to understand what the future ocean might look like. These nice packaged data products help inform our biological work. A lot of our biological work happens at NOAA laboratories or cooperative institutes across the country, and scientists there will take our data and our information and synthesis products, our information about what might happen in the future, and integrate it into their experimental design. So they're looking at how future or current levels of acidification might impact things like organism health, physiology, and behavior as the ocean changes. And they can take those organismal level experiments and integrate them up into ecosystem assessments that help us understand how the entire system might change. And that is really where we start to think about vulnerability of systems and what we might need to do to address vulnerability. So that brings me to the tippy top of our pyramid, assessing vulnerability and adaptation. One way that we're doing this at OAP is through these projects called Regional Vulnerability Assessments, or RVAs. The goal of RVAs is to synthesize ocean acidification information at a regional scale to assess where societal vulnerabilities are or where they might emerge in order to provide actionable information for marine resource decision makers. RVA teams generally bring together academic and federal scientists along with industry leaders and tribal leaders to make decisions and assess the vulnerability in their backyards. So far, we have funded 11 RVAs nationwide, and they range in topic from understanding the sea scallop socio-ecological system in the Northeast to understanding how ocean acidification might impact tribal community well-being in the Pacific Northwest, which was actually a project led by Jan. And you might notice that our RVA projects often coincide with where our monitoring stations are, and I think that makes sense because where we have this abundance of information, we're really able to bring it together with what's happening in society and issues facing those specific regions to start to understand vulnerability. So I think that the RVAs in that way are just a really good example of what we can do with data in the new blue economy to inform decision making and make sure that we're prepared for ocean acidification in our coastal regions. So I think with that, I'll just finish up here by saying I think it's really imperative to continue bolstering this pyramid approach as we move forward through continued data collection, refined biological studies and data products with that information, and continued support for these regional vulnerability assessments and similar projects that can be used to inform decision making nationwide and make sure that we're prepared for future ocean change. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Liza. Thank you, Gerhard. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Chris. So this is a town hall, and I'm your moderator. I'm going to have questions for the group. I could ask lots of questions already, but we have a microphone here, so if folks are interested in asking a question, please queue on up at the mic. And when you do ask a question, I'd like you to identify yourself and your organization if you're willing. I have a question for you, Liza, that just popped into my head at the end that I might start with, which is with the RVA process, it sounds like you're going to learn about vulnerabilities in communities related to the data and information relevant for the fisheries applications. And does that influence then your observing regime and the other parts of the pyramid that you described?
Yeah, oh, there it is. Yeah, so I think that that is a goal, to kind of have it be that kind of cycle of information where we're taking what we have to inform vulnerability, and then making decisions to address that vulnerability, which will include things like, adapting our observing networks to make sure we're capturing exactly what we need to see in those regions. So I think absolutely.
Everyone's lining up all at once.
Does that work? Great. I could expand on that, being so thrilled to be working on an RVA project on the Olympic coast with four tribes, two of the same, which are also in backyard buoys. One of the things that we learned, and what I really love about the program, is that it's a socio-ecological integrated study. So we actually work with a social scientist on the project who worked with the tribes, understanding their needs and dependencies on key species. And then as oceanographers and the modelers, and we're fortunate to have Sam Sidlecki, who also runs the J-Scope model that you saw there, as we did what scientists always do, is figure out like tons of information about 7 variables, including aragonite saturation, oxygen, temperature, looking at conditions now, conditions in the future, comparing those back and forth, delta plots, thresholds, all of that. It's 365 plots, literally. But because Melissa Poe, a social scientist, had worked with the tribes to identify the needs, one of those needs is razor clams. Razor clams have been harvested, again, since time immemorial, but they settle on the beach in April and May, and they put down an aragonite shell. So we look now at the delta of aragonite saturation state in April and May, and at the sites where the razor clams are actually harvested. So now we have 2 plots, and it's actually actionable information, because one of the things we found is that there's a north-south gradient in how severe it's going to be. So that really does dovetail quite nicely with an observing strategy. The sanctuary has some moorings, but they don't extend far enough south. So there's an observing need that was really identified by this. So it just worked really well, and it's kudos to the OAP that devised the really good call for it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So, from the audience?
Hello, my name is Catherine Houghton, and I am here from Analog Devices. I run our new Ocean and Climate Innovation Accelerator, which we launched a few months ago in partnership with Woods Hole Oceanographic. The reason I'm here is we are working on building a coalition of high-tech companies, Silicon Valley, worldwide, big companies that have cutting-edge technology that really want to address the climate challenge. And so we've been putting together these companies, and we're also looking for ways to, how do we latch into those big problems? What are those big problems that could use a coalition to come together and help address them? We've got the companies, we've got the technology. We're just looking for those partners that have the data, that would be wanting to partner with those leading edge companies that are really trying to make a difference, and donating or in kind or whatever to help solve those problems. So I'm kind of looking at suggestions about other ways to get connected with NOAA, other organizations that would want to work with us to help bring that technology to these kind of challenges.
So you're asking questions that I have as well, and so I want to ask you a bunch of questions back. I also want to hear from folks on the panel to perhaps respond. Some initial thoughts from me is that there's multiple avenues. One certainly is working with our Technology Partnership Office and the SBIR program, but that's small business, so it may not work for some that you're talking about. But one of the things I want to work with them on is building a more regular cadence for NOAA's activities that are engaging with the entire community in the new blue economy context. So we're taking calls and taking questions from folks like you and trying to build our lists. And I'm talking to folks like MTS about events like Oceans and the industry dialogue that they've been having that's sponsored by the GOMO program and the UN. And how do we design engagements to identify those types of challenges at a level of specificity that leads to innovation? Because if you don't have a problem or a challenge to work on across different people, you can't really make headway. And so how do we do that?
Yeah, our biggest challenge is that I can bring together a huge technology stack. So Analog Devices, for people who don't know, we're a microelectronics manufacturer. We make the accelerometers, we make the sensors, we make the battery management systems. We're in probably every drone, every car. Your cell phone is filled with our devices. So we are already in this space. We're just trying to understand how to navigate it with our partners. And like I said, we can go all the way from the chip up to the AI ML. We're just trying to figure out, what's the DARPA grand challenge that we can go after?
Yeah, from my perspective on the MTS side, I wish there was a DARPA grand challenge that you could go after. I wish there was. I mean, there's legislation pending in the U.S. for consideration of an ARPA Oceans. And within the U.S. system, there is not a place to aggregate these demands and then be able to fund the execution of a challenge for them. We've seen some organic partnerships rise globally under the UN Decade or through larger partnerships with philanthropy. I think we're in the landscape at the moment where if you have a coalition of the willing and you have a target that the coalition is willing to look at, you may be able to make some success just through inertia and through tightening the scope on exactly what you're trying to look at. But at the moment, there is no ready funder who's looking at ocean shots like we heard about earlier in the week, or grand ocean challenges that can fund the public, private, and really industry partnerships to drive solutions.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that is with the companies we're talking about, we're not asking for money. We're bringing stuff to you, to whom? The industry, to the ocean world, and say, okay, we're coming with all this technology, we're coming with money, we're coming with people, how can we help? And we can't quite figure out where do we go with that offer. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, it's unusual that people come and don't want money, so I commend you for that. No, kidding aside, I think you being here and engaging in MTS, which Chris could probably support. I mean, there are a number of discussion groups, working groups, if I can just get very specific, where you could get into a dialogue with other partners, whether they're manufacturers or folks that work in a particular sector, to begin to do an assessment where you might fit in. If I was going to speak specifically to IOOS, while we engage in technology, I mean, MTS is clearly a leader and we partner to, garner benefits, but we have manufacturers that are partners that work with us as well. And I always suggest just getting engaged in some of the partnerships, because oftentimes we don't know you exist. So as opportunities come up, we can't build you into those opportunities because A, we don't know you exist, 2, we don't even know what you do, even if we knew who you were. And so being able to engage, and with IOOS, you have the advantage that you can engage very focused in one area here in Virginia, or you can engage in several spots around the country. You're going to get local folks that subscribe to a national standard and have inroads already with the agencies, with decision makers, with government officials, with local partners. That can also help describe the landscape and perhaps brainstorm some opportunity areas. I don't know enough about what you do. It sounds fascinating and exciting. I didn't know you have stuff in my phone, but I think I would be willing to, have a follow-on, if you like, offline and see if we can, at the end of the day, we serve as also a venue. Besides what we do, we serve as a venue in our communities, in our regions, and nationally to bring folks together. And if we can help you find a solution with other partners that we work with or others, we'd be happy to do that.
Excellent. I'll follow up with you after this.
Thank you. Laura?
Hey, Laura Rogers from NASA, but I'm actually going to read a comment from the online platform that I think dovetails really nicely with this conversation. But this is from Tom. He says, is there a chance we can begin consolidating RA Regional Association needs, services, and available assets clearly and concisely, perhaps through the greater US IOOS, so that we have the one-stop shop for sectoral businesses to go, find services needed, and make an offer? And then a suggestion, maybe a IOOS pavilion at Biloxi 23 would be fantastic.
I like it when a suggestion has a solution proposed at the same time. That sounds very good to me. I like the suggestion. I want to let Jan and Gerhard perhaps react to that. Our office is very much working with the regions on an ongoing basis, and I've been talking about as we face this increased demand, as we try to scale up our capabilities and have more people to answer the phone in the office on this type of innovation and technology acceleration topic. How do we do that in a cohesive way across the network of all of our regions? And so,
yeah, I'll start. It's a very interesting question to me because of to me it's a scaling issue, right? And so when you say one-stop shop, I think for the Pacific Northwest, I like to think that NANUS is, right, on that scale. But when you think national, that's obviously not sufficient. And so the IOOS website and some of the various tools they've made, like environmental sensor maps and links to where the models are and that sort of thing, can offer that one-stop shopping too. But I guess for me, it's what are you in the market for in terms of your one-stop shop? And I think that's kind of, to me, what I love about the fact that we have regional linking to national and national linking to global. I work on the global scale with the Global OA Observing Network, and being able to see data sets that span those scales, and the needs are going to be different. And so I think anytime we think about that word one-stop shop, I think we have to think about what audience are we trying to capture with that, because there's lots of different needs for that very kind of synthesizing capability, which I think is great. I love the idea of a pavilion.
I think that's great, Jan. If I could just add to what you said. The regional, we toyed with this notion, and we still have these discussions about national level products versus regional products. But I guess I'm not sure I'd be curious to hear what else, or what specifically Tom was trying to get at with that, because while I'm all in favor of trying to create one-stop shops, I think we all feel, ever since the Ocean Commission came out with its report back in 2004, that regional governance and regional management is a better approach than trying to do one size fits all for the entire country. Alaska is not Florida, Virginia is not Hawaii. However, there are opportunities to deal with certain questions, particularly when we're talking about a national level approach for communicating with folks. The IOOS program office, or the US IOOS office, plays that role, but we also have the IOOS Association, and as vice chair and chair, coincidentally, of that, and we're seeing a leadership change as well. We have been discussing, we haven't come up with any commitments yet, but we have been discussing looking at additional services that we might be able to provide as an association that could provide certain centralized approaches, communications that would be more appropriate to do in that way than it would be at the regional level. So I'm going to take that comment away, and if Tom is willing to offline talk about this some more, I'd like to hear more about that, and we'll take that as an action in our discussions and see how we can do that. Now, if Tom is just working for the exhibits in Gulfport, then I'm sure we can work something out. But beyond that, I'm interested in the larger question as well.
So thank you. Excellent. Another question from the audience. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi. My name is Becca, and I'm a research technician at Rutgers University. And this is a question for Jan and Liza. We had a fisherman come in the other day because my field station is in a local community. And he was like, well, I've been doing some reading on ocean acidification, and it seems hopeless. So why waste your money on researching that? And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you're trying to reach those audiences that might not necessarily be plugged into the resources you're putting out. Like, how are you reaching those people who might not be looking out for the latest NOAA update and things like that? So, yeah.
Thank you. That's a great question, and I'm really glad you're here and part of the conversation. One of the most powerful ways that I can think of communicating the message is that, yes, change is going to happen, but what a lot of people don't realize is that the degree of change is a decision that we're making every day. So if we follow the business as usual emissions pathway, that's one series of changes. And if we follow something that's less emissions than that, that's a much more manageable series of changes. And so as you keep going in that direction, you lose more freedom in terms of what you're going to be able to adapt to, okay? And I was hearing this morning, I believe it was when the chief scientist of NOAA and NASA were on the stage, and I apologize, but I don't remember who said it, but somebody was talking about an overlay, I think it was them, where you could actually see these contrasting futures. Jean-Pierre Gattuso wrote a really beautiful paper in Science in 2016, and I'm happy to send you the PDF, where he has a figure of these contrasting figures. And when I give talks to, like, you know, garden clubs, it's so hard to end on such a, like, downer note, because that feeling of hopelessness, but it is so important for people to understand the degree of change that they're signing up for is a decision that we all make every day, and it really does make a difference. So that's how I would reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great answer, Jan. And it's hard when you're talking about a topic that might make people feel a little hopeless. So we always try to get that message through that there is hope. We're making choices every day. And I think it's important to give people ideas of actions that they can take in their everyday life to improve our situation. These are things, I mean, you hear drive less. Maybe that is possible, maybe it's not for some people, but there are things, especially in your community, that you can get into. Like, I'm thinking if you really like to eat shellfish, there are opportunities where you can take all the shells from the oysters you eat at your party and return them to an organization locally that will put them back into the ocean, and in hopes that it will help with ocean acidification in your region. So that's something that anyone can do and feel like you're making a difference, and move on from that feeling of hopelessness a little bit. For fishermen, maybe you could talk to them and say if you want to participate in understanding what's happening, because we might not know exactly what's happening and we want to see how change is going. Things like getting a sensor onto their ship, if they're open to that type of thing, would be really helpful. So I think there are opportunities to inspire that hope at all levels, and yeah, I would say that's the best way to go about it.
And if I could, Becca, right? And you're at Rutgers. Yeah. So I know you didn't ask me, but I can't miss the opportunity to mention, if it wasn't already clear, that Rutgers is one of the largest partners in Maricus in the Mid-Atlantic. And in addition to, all the folks that are doing physical oceanography and other work, obviously you have Dr. Grace Saba at Rutgers, who's a leader in OA. I don't know if you work with her, but you probably do.
I work for Dr. Daphne Monroe, but
Oh.
I know Grace.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she was instrumental in starting MACAN, the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Acidification Network, which is that partnership that is trying to get to the stakeholders. We've had great successes talking to the community, getting feedback from the community. And so I would welcome, if you'd like, your participation in MACAN. Mary Ford, my colleague, is one of the co-chairs along with Marco, director, and maybe you're already involved, but...
Yeah, I've done a panel for Marco, so I know Mary.
Oh, okay, good. Well then, I just encourage you to stay involved, and I'd love to, I hadn't spoken to Mary or heard about this specific case, so if she doesn't know about it, please feel free to reach out, because we'd love to, help you as much as, we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so
Sure,
much.
absolutely.
Hello, I'm V. I am from NOAA Coast Watch, which is part of Nestis, but is across different line offices, and we supply satellite data focusing on the coast and ocean regions, inland waters, and all that. So my question is, how do you see Nestis and therefore Coast Watch helping to support this mission that we all share? Particularly with that first baseline of our pyramid talking about the new blue economy as we start to refocus our energy towards, observing our oceans. Yes.
I'm happy to go.
Jan,
I'm
go
happy
ahead.
to start this conversation, and thank you for what you do at Coast Watch. I'm excited to say that in NANUS, as well as other regional associations, what we really try to do is tailor information needs for various users. In the Pacific Northwest, a really important user is the tuna fishing fleet, both commercial, and these are like mom and pop, go out on charters kind of businesses, and they're so key to the Oregon coastal community economy. We use Coast Watch information products and data for our Tuna Fishers app. We're ingesting some of your data streams also to help us in portray where we're having where we're having marine heat waves. And so we use your information extensively in our information apps that we're turning around. So I just want to say that it's not lost on us, and I think what's so exciting is as new needs emerge, to be thinking of other products that we would want to co-develop. So thank you for mentioning Coast Watch.
That is great to hear. Thank you, Jan.
Hey, Carl, could I? So we also, in our region, ingest both NESDIS and NASA data feeds to create tailored products for some of the users. And I know it's sometimes a question of prioritization, and you can't do every product in the world, but we're always happy to discuss between our experts and your offices if there's an interest to create additional products, because we're creating them because users need them and because they're unable to do what they need to do with the existing federal products. So, but if there's, if you're looking at prioritizing or looking at, okay, well, where could, this seems like a really great investment maybe, or this is a great, user that we'd like to get to, we'd love to talk about that. And if you create it, then we don't have to. So we'd be happy to use more of both NESDIS and NASA data products.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I've been out and about myself talking about the ocean services within the new blue economy. In comparison to the weather enterprise and the ocean enterprise, I feel like we're a couple decades behind in having a customer base with a ready cadence of using our information services, and that we need to be a little more willing to name something that's not fully realized to what it can be, but give it a name as a service, and give it a service name and a version number, and identify the next improvement in science or technology that it needs and wants to get. And I was thinking about the Coast Watch office knowing that the tuna app has it, and then the conversations leading to the next, oh, well, if you could give us a resolution of this type of temperature or salinity at this periodicity, it would improve the product for the customer that we've heard about. And then you get that sort of next versioning thing happening on a grander scale. And so that came to mind with this. I had a thought to pivot to a workforce question. So one of the things in Dr. Spenrad's and Liesl Holtling's book on the New Blue Economy is about the workforce tomorrow. And I'm curious about anyone in the panel's thoughts about how do we build the workforce of tomorrow faster? Because I'm hearing across the board, wind energy is an example where the data analytics companies are all poaching from each other for talent, and there's not enough. And so we're doing a better job in the UN Decade and other places of trying to acknowledge this and grow the workforce faster, and I'm working on it as hard as I can. So give me your best special sauce for that. Go ahead, Chris.
I mean, this will be sacrilegious coming from a higher education background, but I think what we have to wrestle with is there's new ways to bring talent into a workforce pipeline that doesn't require a traditional four-year degree at mainly coastal institutions that mainly work on the ocean sciences. We can recognize that talent is evenly distributed across the country, especially in rural areas, and access to opportunity is not. And so if we're willing to change the paradigm in how we define credentials and how we define capacity and move towards systems of stackable credentials and discrete training and discrete skills development that allow us to customize the particular complement of capacities that someone has to go into a technical field, it'll get people into the system much faster, and it provides them building blocks that the chief scientist talked about this morning that you can then translate and parlay into a different career or a different place somewhere down the road. I think if we're going to rely on a traditional four-year educational model, we're going to find that we have a continued bottleneck in the pipeline of talent coming into an increasingly growing and rapidly changing knowledge-based and sort of technical-based economy.
Well said. Traditional solutions don't solve new problems. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I think is a real advantage, you're going to get the idea that I'm a fan of IOOS, of the regional association structure in IOOS is because we are partnerships, whether you're a 501c3 like Maricus or at a university like NANUS, we are partnering with various academic partners. And that includes community colleges, that includes tribal schools, and getting the message out and opportunities, internships, that's what we're really striving to develop through NANUS, is having like hands-on summer internships where people can go out with a buoy group and learn like all this really cool stuff. And I agree with you, not everybody needs a four-year degree to do the kind of really fascinating jobs that are that do exist in the new blue economy. So I think the more we can work towards providing those opportunities, getting the message out, but it's really great because we have this partnership already built in. So that's pretty useful. Anything to add?
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate all that's been said. I think if I speak, I mean, there's a number of aspects to this. If we're talking about larger scale oceanography and technology and the techs and the sort of the workforce we need, that's some big questions to answer. If I maybe focus more meaningfully on how we're dealing with it within IOOS and within our regional associations. Look, one of our core beliefs, our core values is sustainability and sustained operations over time. That requires having folks and backups and having people that are trained that know how to take care of it, because people change jobs or people move on or people retire. We see our founders who were building all this up retiring, and okay, where's the next generation? So we're constantly asking that question and trying to find ways to contribute in what way we can with the limited resources that we have. So internships, scholarships to expose students to ocean observing, to get them interested in operational oceanography, trainings that we offer on things like gliders. Some of our university partners have started that on HF radar technician type duties. And then getting to the kids that are younger with partnerships with Sea Grant to get into schools. And now we were just starting new partnerships with local organizations that actually are getting into underrepresented and underserved communities, and getting kids that have no exposure to the ocean or no exposure to science, getting them jazzed and excited. I mean, we're not going to see a benefit in the next 2, 3, 4 years, but really this needs to be built at a number of different levels. And so we can do what we want to keep our business going now, but we really need to start thinking, if some are already, but we've started thinking, making sure we're trying to contribute to that longer term solution too.
I see we have another question coming, but I want to give Liza a chance to reply.
Thank you. I have a few things to say about this. So I was thinking today about my own journey to this stage. And in graduate school, I was funded by NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program through a graduate fellowship. I was provided training by them on communicating ocean acidification and stakeholder engagement. I've participated in MTS since I was a graduate student. I did glider camp and all of that good stuff. And here I am at MTS Oceans representing NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program. And I think that I'm not the norm in that way, but I would suggest that it's important to strive to that being the norm, where students are supported from an early stage by groups that are trying to end up solving these ocean issues in the long run. That really gets people involved. I think it's important to actively pursue students who have been historically excluded from this area, from marine technology, and make sure that they're funded, paid well, and supported in their training and brought to this space. I also think it's really important to foster this interdisciplinary space. I think that a lot of the problems that we're thinking about today and the new blue economy itself is so interdisciplinary. There are all these partnerships we need to think about, and more students now are interested in problem solving and the applicability of their research. I think because they've been brought up in a world that is facing a lot of issues and they want to help to make change. So fostering that type of interdisciplinary thinking is really important from a young age. And yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done, but pay students well is my main message.
Thanks, Liza. I'm glad we have you on this panel. Yes, from the audience.
So I'm Bill Wilson from Cape Fear Ocean Labs in Wilmington, North Carolina. We're a 501c3 economic accelerator focusing on blue tech in the southeast North Carolina region. One of the things that comes to mind as I'm listening to all of this is the role for entrepreneurship in developing the solutions. You guys talk about all the solutions that you're developing and providing to people, but entrepreneurs are a real accelerator for progress in almost any area. I'm actually working with one software entrepreneur right now, and we're kind of digging around trying to find a blue economy kind of application. He's really interested in the idea of doing that. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's had several other businesses before. He's in the software industry. He's got analytics experience. And so I'm just wondering if there's any program, or you thought about any programs, SBIR grants, anything like that, to help small businesses, startups, innovators, entrepreneurs working in the private sector to participate in the new blue economy? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely want you to give me your contact information after, as you as well, because we're certainly thinking about that within NOAA and how we accelerate the growth of the new blue economy, and it absolutely includes your type of community of participants and how we marry it up with the needs that we're learning about from the IOOS regions, for instance, who are in place for the long haul, as you heard from Gerhard earlier, but don't have the resources to do nearly what we're asking them to do in terms of meeting societal need. And then there's all of this, we government programs no longer can keep pace with the cost of doing all of this work. And now there's huge number of entrants bringing resources to the table, and how we organize and accept that offer from NGOs and from private sector is an open question we're ready to start tackling for real right now. And so that type of energy and entrepreneurship has to be brought to the table. And I'm a firm believer that we've got to figure out a way to do funding opportunities that are challenge-based across different domain and societal benefit areas. So one sort of big area, and then hone in on some specific problem and fund that to happen. I mean, and we're having that through the National Oceanographic Partnership Program, and we should scale that up more and do more of that. And we should do it so that it allows all the participants like you just described. And the regions by law are supposed to work with your type of groups as well. So let's keep talking and getting your ideas to our office. And I'm working on building a team across NOAA on New Blue Economy for Dr. Spinrad, and we're trying to answer those questions too.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Sinclair, and the question that I have for the panel is that I have observed over the last couple of months, and then also in talking with several of the exhibitors here, that folks are definitely looking for technical support across the board. And I hear what you're saying about needing people to enter into the pipeline, and possibly not from traditional oceanography routes, but also across the board in engineering. And so what I would like to find out is, does the community have any plans to have a, say, central jobs board? Because what I see is a primary issue is that, say, a mechanical engineer who might have interest in ocean tech doesn't necessarily know where to look for that type of position. And so if there is a, say, central clearinghouse for the open jobs, I think that that would go a long way to attracting new people into the field. But I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
I agree, it certainly would. And I think there's been various iterations of that have come up over the years. You know, I've been in the ocean world for 20 years now, and you know, over that 20 years, there's probably been 15 different job boards that were the sort of number one at the time that I would always go to look for what people were hiring for. I don't know that anyone's going to lead in this space in the ocean community, in part because the ocean community is so distributed and so diverse. There's a few great examples of today where you can find a few thousand jobs online on a single job board around ocean technology. But I think the other part that undercuts why these job boards don't seem to survive for more than a few years is that even still, most of the hiring in our community is done through who you know and who's in your network. Because talent is so thin and there's so much demand for anyone you can find that most of the hiring is through who you connect with at meetings like this, or who else is in your section for MTS, or whatever professional society you're part of. So I think partially what we have to wrestle with as a community is being more inclusive and bringing more folks into the community, but also expanding our reach in who we're talking to as we're looking for talent.
Another piece of that is build on what's working, on increasing the age, the getting to younger people sooner in terms of inspirational experiential learning opportunities into the fields we care about. so that, like the MATE program that's funded well by NSF to get to where it is today, that does ROV competitions. I was talking to Jill Zandy last night, and they've got 46 competitions globally that happen every year, and they're doing middle and high school students, and so that's helpful at getting at a more inclusive approach. But that doesn't really answer your question. And so I don't know. I think Chris knows more about it than I do. I think we can take that for consideration as we're building our new Blue Economy team in NOAA to at least have a way to try to exchange that information more rapidly. And
it's something MTS has struggled with. I mean, we've had this conversation internally of how do we do a better service to the community of providing access to opportunities and jobs, and we don't have the solution. We're looking for the solution. I think a lot of folks in the industry are looking for that solution, but it's a tough one for us to solve.
I wonder, you know, I hear the need and I hear your answers, but what's coming to my mind is the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange, which is something that it's kind of like, I hate to say it, but Facebook for nerds, you know, kind of thing, where you post something, right? And there's threads, unlike Facebook. Anyway, that analogy going out the door. Anyway, it's an interactive thing, and there could be threads, and so, for instance, in the OAIE, I don't know that there is one on jobs, but there could be. You can have one on sensors, you can have one on this, that, or the other thing. And I think sometimes why job boards fail is because somebody has to be the grand poobah and maintain that, and that's really difficult to do. But if it's being sustained by the community and people are posting opportunities, maybe something more self-sustaining could survive. I don't know, but it's worth a thought, and I really think it's a good question.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answers. And I mean, I personally am a systems and electrical engineer, and have a background in oceanography and physical oceanography. And I will type in ocean technology or ocean sensors into LinkedIn, you know, and get nothing. You know, and so then what I do is I look back at past conferences and try to get the exhibitor list, and then, you know, go to their company, to the company websites. But it's quite a bit of legwork in order to find opportunities. But I will say that, like, I attended virtually Ocean Sciences earlier in the year, and then I've sat in virtually on many different panel discussions, and the recurring theme is that everybody needs help, and everybody's looking for people, and they can't find people. And then, you know, I look at their companies, and they have no job openings. And so I'm wondering, well, where's their need? Where are they posting these openings? Because they're not easy to find at all.
yeah, well, thank you for your question. We'll be challenged by it, and we'll work on it. I don't have a specific promise to solve that one, but I think I'm supposed to be moving on because the clock is now going up, which means we're over time. It used to be counting down. So I think with that, I want to wrap up our session and ask the audience to give a round of applause for our panelists. And thank you all very much for your participation. Thank you so much to MTS and Oceans 22 for having and hosting this town hall. And I know I'm supposed to hand over the mic to my gentleman on my right over here. So let me do that and let...
Carl, distinguished panelists. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry that it didn't work out having the panel Tuesday, but I am struck at how well, this session actually fit today's theme. So I'm very grateful that you went today. And that today's theme, of course, is building strong working relationships, right? And the IOOS construct, a public-private partnership, right, is a powerful example of how this type of coordination can be so much more, right, than the sum of the components. And I'm especially glad to see the diversity, in this partnership. Industry, academia, state and federal, international, tribal, right? And I also appreciated seeing the strong NOAA contribution to today's panels. This was really very much a NOAA and NASA day. I really liked that. And really through the week, the nexus of NOAA, NASA, Navy, really the three N's, right, has played such a huge role in making this conference such a success. So to conclude the ballroom session, I'd like to call my two co-chairs, Captain Ray Toll and NASA's Laura Rogers, up to the podium. And on behalf of all of us, we thank this panel, you in the audience and online, and all the scholarly contributions to this conference. And Ray and Laura, I believe you have some final words and acknowledgments.
Thank you for helping us conclude. Appreciate you staying up with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a 5-year planning effort that began in 2017 and actually began with a conversation with Dr. Atkinson, which is another reason why his memory has been with us the entire week. We had on the order of 50 people volunteering to coordinate and help us plan this process. Some of these folks are right here in front of you, and that's why we wanted you to be a part of our farewell. But one of the things we experimented with, I did this in 2012, as you've heard. In 2022, I thought, well, you know what? I shouldn't do this all by myself again. So I drafted these two people behind me. And one of the thoughts I had is, we've talked about whole of government. Laura from NASA, Dan from Navy, and I am ex-Navy, but I've been sprinkled across this network you've heard, but throughout the conference, I've done a lot of these kinds of things as it pertains to meteorology and oceanography. Remembering my background was a combination of top of atmosphere, bottom of ocean, with degrees in both meteorology and oceanography. So I just wanted to say to that group of all 50 of us and all of the folks that we touched in the planning over the past 5 years, thank you very much. Laura?
Well, I'll just conclude with, first, a big thank you to Ray for dragging me into this. I like to say that he called me the last day before I went out on maternity leave, and I had no idea what I was signing up for, but my son turns 5 in December, so it's been a trip. But I want to thank all the scientists, the technicians, the experts, just the network of folks that have gone into putting this together. And just thank you for all the energy that you've brought to this. It's been an amazing week, and I can't thank all of you enough. I just, again, want to thank the panel that's here, so please join me again in a round of applause, and please join them after the panel. So thank you, thank you, thank you.